evening, IES Abroad alumni, friends, faculty, and staff. My name is Dawn DeBoard, and I'm the Associate Director of Advancement. And this evening, I have the pleasure to speak with Dr. Shirley Marks, IES Vienna alumna 1967-68, and Mural Scholar. Dr. Marks' achievements, just to name a few, include her being the first Spelman College alumna and only the second African-American woman in 23 years to graduate from Harvard Medical School. After completing her medical studies at Harvard, she returned to Houston and taught at Baylor College of Medicine as an assistant professor of psychiatry from 1976 to 1993. She went on then to work at a University Park Hospital in Tyler, Texas, and provided psychiatric services to inmates of the Texas Bureau of Prisons in Fort Worth. Going into private practice and then retiring back in 2012. As a board certified psychiatrist, Dr. Marks is nationally known for her work on reducing the stigma around mental illness and advocating for mental health equity. Coming out of retirement in 2018, Dr. Marks is currently serving as the Regional Director for Behavioral Health Services at Texas Tech University Health Science Center, Correctional Managed Care. So without further ado, I present to everyone Dr. Shirley Marks. How are you this evening?
I'm wonderful. How are you doing? I'm so
doing
excited.
Great. I'm very excited. I am very, very excited to speak with you this evening. So I'm just going to dive right in. Okay. And then later on, we'll have hopefully some Q&A from the audience as well, too.
Okay. All right.
So to start off with, tell me a little bit about your journey leading up into attending Spelman College. And did you know you wanted to be a doctor when you even went off to college?
Well, yes, but not the type you're thinking. I actually wanted to be a veterinarian.
Oh.
Yep. I don't have that on any of my bios, but I wanted to be a veterinarian. And through middle school, mostly high school, back then they didn't have very many opportunities available. And so I would be placed with the agriculture guys, you know, the FHA or whatever it's called.
Yeah, the 4-H and all that
4-H,
stuff.
right. And they kind of didn't know what to do with me, although I had a female cousin who was a veterinarian. And so I was just not encouraged to pursue that direction, but that was always something that I wanted to do. And people refer to me as a dog whisperer. I'm just kind of have special talent with dogs, and we were just talking earlier about one of my pets at home. Yeah. So that was really what I wanted to do, was to be a veterinarian. And then when I went to Spelman, I just changed it to thinking physician never even occurred to me. I was just thinking maybe biomedical research or something like that. And that was kind of just where it sat for years until, you know, later on in my career, going to Morehouse, where I took most of my science classes, even though Spelman, as you know, is all female, and then Morehouse all male, but I would take my classes over there.
Yes.
And I would, you know, some of the guys were talking about medical school and all that, but I just kind of put it on the back burner.
Yeah. Did you ever think it was an option, or did you just put it on the back burner? Did it feel like it was an option for you?
I really just put it on the back burner. And I tell people this because it really is being in the right place at the right time. Back in the 60s, and I'm not really sure when Spelman changed it, if you did a year abroad, you were required to return and which would be your senior year. You were required to return and put in another year. So all of us were 5-year students. And that year was the year that Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy were assassinated. And that was, that really put a mark on my soul and my memory that whole year, because being in Atlanta, we all knew about, Reverend Martin Luther King and his church and his family and all that, but we missed, no matter how many documentaries I see, it's just still not the same, because we just weren't there.
Yeah.
But what happened with that was that Harvard, like so many other institutions, decided, well, let's start giving minority students, and unfortunately we were called disadvantaged, but let's give some disadvantaged minority students some opportunities. I had done a summer program the summer before, and Dr. David Potter, he was really special. He was the recruiter that came down. And the three schools in Boston, Boston University, Tufts, and Harvard, formed a central recruitment council because they were trying to dispel the myth of not having a significant applicant pool. So they said, we're going to go to these historically Black universities, and we're going to make sure we find the students. And I commend them for that. And I was actually at Morehouse at the time, sitting in the office of the chairman of the biology department when all that took place. And so everything just kind of happened real fast.
Literally in the right place at the right time.
I really was in the right, because had I not spent that extra year, I wouldn't have been there. And nor would the opportunities in terms of being recruited. They provided funding, all of that. And so it really was a very, very special opportunity for me. I really feel blessed for that having happened. But not knowing the history, I mean, I didn't know I was going to be the only Black female in my class, nor that I was the second Black female to graduate or to enter. Coincidentally, the first Black female actually was from my hometown. Her parents, they moved to Boston. She went to Texas College, which is right there in Tyler. I didn't know this until I was doing a history as we were celebrating the life of Dr. Alvin Poussant, who became the associate dean at the time. And that's when I read that. I said, oh my. And so she and her family moved to the Boston area. And so she was admitted the year I was born. So they went that many years because for many years, Harvard was all male until World War II. And as with many jobs, the men were away at war. And so they decided to open up the classes to females. And that's when she was accepted. And then,
Now, do you think you would have still gone if you would have known you were going to be the only Black woman in that class when you walked in?
Knowing me, I probably would have. I probably would have been more nervous, only because I've always done that. I've been up for the challenge. Sometimes the challenge has been pretty steep, but I've always done that. And, I think of some programs that I went to even in high school, that the National Science Foundation programs that, most people had never even heard of, that I just happened to hear about them. And I said, well, I'll go, So I probably would have gone, but I would have had a lot of questions like, could I afford it? I would have probably, like I say, I probably would have been more nervous about it than not knowing. And so there were 16 of us, and I was the only female.
Yeah. Now, backing up a little bit before you got to Harvard, you studied with IES in Vienna in 1967 for a full year as a Mural Scholar. So what happened at that time at Spelman that sort of granted you that opportunity to be chosen as a Mural Scholar?
It's an academic scholarship. It's just your GPA. Pretty much, it's not, it's not a big competition or competitive situation. We were fortunate to have had 4 men from Morehouse and 2 women from Spelman. So there were 6 of us. And that year there was 1 other female. I believe she did France. So there were 3 of us from Spelman who did IES, but she was in another program.
Okay. So your choice was Vienna or Paris back then.
Yeah, well, by then I knew I guess I must have already figured out that medicine was going to be it. And so in order to do that, so many of the schools were requiring German. And I said, well, let me just give it a try. Let me do Vienna. And I don't know whether my colleague, Dr. Maxine Hayes, I don't know whether we ever talked about why and how we made the decision, but it was good to have her there. And like I said, 4 other men from Morehouse also there.
Yeah. And how was that time in Vienna as a young Black woman during the 60s?
Different, I know it's a cliche to say cultural shock, but it was. I've always loved traveling, but of course, traveling abroad is different. Austria, I'm sorry, was a Catholic country, so we had a lot of holidays, so a lot of time off. Some of that was sponsored by IES, which was a good thing as part of the program. So we really got a chance to see a lot of Europe. So that part was good. Many of our courses were in German, and I'm not going to say I was then nor now the most fluent in German, but it was good. Sometimes you just go through the motions and you accept what's handed to you. But I certainly on a likability scale, I'm certainly over at the top of the likability scale. Yeah, I enjoyed it. And again, I think it was mostly just enjoying the travel that, we were able to do, and it was the first time really getting a sense of different cultures. And we pretty much took in that entire all the European countries pretty much.
That you could get to. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And was there anything life-changing or any life-changing moments that happened during your time abroad, maybe that were pivotal to sort of, the trajectory of your career?
Well, and just what I said, the biggest was the deaths of the 2 icons, Reverend Martin Luther King and it was funny. I remember I was in Turkey when Robert Kennedy passed, and I didn't know because we didn't have all the cell phones and all of that. And I remember a gentleman came over to me. I guess he knew I was American and asked me if I knew that he had passed, and so that was a big shock to me. But that was probably the biggest. And I guess it brought the 6 of us closer. One of the members in the class went into divinity school. And so he was very good at leading many prayer sessions and that kind of thing. And that helped because we had some soul searching and healing to do, and race relations, because we were 6, but we were the only Blacks in that class.
Yeah, and not being on American soil while that was taking place too.
Exactly. Yeah. And what we were going through emotionally and really couldn't talk about to anyone other than our small circle.
Yeah.
Because no one could appreciate how it impacted. I shouldn't say no one, but we didn't approach others for us to even test out whether they would appreciate it in the way that we did. But it was difficult times, and all 6 of us, we came from modest middle-class families, but it wasn't where we were able to just pick up the phone, every week and call home, and so that was not available. So we did a lot of writing and that kind of thing. So it was, because April and then moving on toward the end of the year. So some of that, as I say, I just wanted to just soak up all the documentaries I could, but it still didn't bring it, and still to this day still doesn't bring it quite home to me. I still get emotional when I think about that whole time, just because we were just away during that time.
Yeah. And I mean, just from what I've heard of others' experiences and knowing where they were and what was going on in their life at that time. So yeah, definitely
Yeah.
something that sticks with you.
Yeah, and probably if our school had not been Atlanta, in Atlanta, might have also made a difference as well. Let's say if we were in, our school was in California or whatever, it may not have had the same impact as it was being right there, in Atlanta.
For sure. And then did you have to readjust when you came back to the States?
I believe so. Yes, because I came back and I don't know, I can't remember how many weeks, some of that's a blur. How many weeks were between that? We had the summer, of course, and when school started. But there was an adjustment, and primarily because I didn't know the ladies in the class that I was in. Because when you're in the sciences, you pretty much have your head in those books. And so I really didn't know the ladies who were a year behind me as much as I knew the ladies in my class or a year ahead of me. So that was an adjustment because I didn't know a lot of the ladies. So just coming back and trying to adapt to that did make a difference.
Yeah. And did the environment of just being in Vienna and adjusting to life in Europe, I'm sure coming back to America, like what were the differences that you encountered other than at school?
I'm trying to remember specifics because just, all I have is just a general impression, but nothing that stands out as that difficult. You know what I mean? It's not like some horrible thing that happened that I had to adapt to.
Yeah.
But just knowing that I come from a relatively small family. And all of that was also happening around the time. That's what I'm saying. The 60s was really was a time of revolution because, Vienna was 67 to 68. And so my 5th year at Spelman was 68, 69. And 70 was the year that I'm from Texas, I'm a native Texan, that the schools in Texas integrated. So those of us who were in the predominantly Black schools, our schools closed. So not only was I experiencing that, but my parents decided to move from Texas to Washington, D.C. So it was that kind of adjustment as well.
Yes.
So, a lot was going on with that. But, when you're young, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. You just kind of
You're going
almost
with the flow,
live in
right?
the moment. Yeah, you don't have time to sit there and process and get depressed about it. You just move on to the next thing. But when people ask questions that you're asking, that's when sometimes you start going like, well, maybe I did have a problem. You know what I mean? Because maybe it was bad, but didn't. So, but as I reflect on it, because sometimes when people ask questions, as you are, and I'm putting the years together and the dates, sometimes there are questions that I hadn't even thought about. But that whole 67 to 69, was difficult. And then during that, it was 69 is when I got accepted to Harvard. And I remember I was going to be a math major. So I had taken one semester of calculus because it wasn't required in my high school. I mean, at my high school, nor required at Spelman. So I had taken one semester and I decided, oh, I'm not going to be, because I had enough credits to have Germany as my minor. But in order to be accepted at Harvard, I needed to finish that second semester of calculus. And that was like a foreign language.
Been there.
that was like a foreign language. And finally, a light bulb just kind of came on in time for the finals. And so I made it through it and made it. But in some ways, it was good because we were over at on Harvard campus, college campus. And, you know, because I was over there finishing up my calculus, the second semester of my calculus course. So I've just been moving around. I just take it as it comes. But that was something that was interesting as well, because I'm sitting there going like, I don't know what this is, you know, and then finally, you know, I got it. And
The light bulb went on.
That light bulb is just, it's just.
We did. So we know that you ended up at Harvard after Spelman. Can you tell us a little bit of what that time was like at Harvard?
It was difficult, probably. I'm going to say in some ways, more of a challenge adapting than Spelman, because at Spelman, there were 6 of us who had something kind of in common. You know, I knew Dr. Maxine Hayes, you know, and, you know, I'd gotten to know the guys from Morehouse. And even if you didn't, you could talk about things that were going on that, you know, places that we'd like to eat, or what we did on weekends and morning chapel. There were things that you talked about. Whereas going to Harvard, there was more isolation. And interestingly enough, you know, I thought that was unique to me, being the only Black female. But because I try to go to reunions at least, you know, every 5 year, because our 50th, I know I don't look it, but next year will be our 50th. I can't believe it either, you know, finishing medical school. So hopefully everything, you know, everything will work out as far as that goes. But going through the reunions, there were only 11 females in my class, and talking with some of them, I remember 1 or 2 in particular, they felt the same isolation, you know. And so it's amazing how it's not until you reach out to others. That's why I've tried through my life to try to be so open-minded to people, whether it's race, gender, education, socioeconomic, it doesn't matter, because you just never know. There are always some commonalities, always some experiences that you can share, you know, have in common. And that was so uplifting. I mean, and that was probably 10, maybe 10, I don't think even 15 years ago that I found that out. So all these years, I'm thinking this was just my thing,
Yeah.
isolation, you know, and just felt like, wow, what I missed, because I didn't stay they had a little dorm there. I didn't stay in the dorm. And so some of the people who did had more of a sense of community because they stayed there. But then I began to adapt. And I think the fact that they had Dr. Poussant come over from Tufts to Harvard, that was a wise decision, because I think they anticipated there being, you know, just a need to have someone who, I used to call him my godfather, who, you know, who had that kind of sensitivity, guidance, and all. And I know I utilized him for that.
Yeah, someone you could go to and confide in.
Yes, and he was well known at that time, and so that helped a lot. And then when you go, and so then you're going out into your classes, and with the exception of probably one or two classes, I was always the only Black person, not just Black female. So it was rather isolating,
Yeah,
One
I can
thing that,
imagine from Spelman to
oh yeah,
that. Yeah.
one of the things that Harvard did, I, I, we always, well, it wasn't a joke. I really think they did it deliberately because they really weren't sure what type student would work out, because many of the students, for example, might be art history students. From our background as African Americans, we always feel like we've got to do the A+ courses and have to have all of them in sciences or whatever. But often, my colleagues they might be majoring in art history, just take the minimum requirements.
And then go to medical school. Yeah.
And then just go on to medical school. And even of the African American students who got accepted, there were, I think, 3 of us who were HBCUs. There were 2 who already had PhDs. I think about 2 or 3 who graduated from Harvard College, several who, from Ivy League, the Princetons and the Yales, and that's kind of how it mixed up. So they, just like they sometimes do in a class, they'll have so many who want to be surgeons, so many who want to be researchers, and I think that's good. It's not, a lot of times people think that some universities, I know Harvard has never done that. They've always wanted diversity of some kind. They've never just said, well, we want the top students in every class, and that's what we're going to have. They wanted diversity. That's why I think they brought in, the persons who might be art history students, and, the ones who want to be surgeons, and the ones who might be researchers.
Sure, for sure. And then your time there, how did you choose psychiatry as your specialty?
I've always been a talker.
Fair enough.
But it's not so much a talker, but people have always, I've been approachable. They will tell me a lot, most of the time without me asking. And so it just comes so naturally that I just said, well, maybe this is what I wanted to do. Now, I really thought, even with child psychiatry, because I thought I was going to, back during that time, it was unheard of almost for a woman to go into surgery. So that was out. We felt limitations. Nowadays, it's nothing for women to go into surgery, hand surgery, and that kind of thing. But back then, surgery was out. So first I thought pediatrics. And then I thought, well, psychiatry, it'll be child psychiatry. And so I went to McLean, which is in Belmont. It's a Harvard affiliated, and they had a wonderful psychiatry residency. And one thing about child psychiatry is that I'm going to try to say this very delicately, because I know there are people in this webinar. Sometimes, let me see how I can say this. Sometimes the parents need some assistance. How does that sound? And that can be very taxing sometimes. And so I just decided that I don't think child psychiatry is for me. I think I'm going to stay with the adults. And so that's what I did, and I'm so glad I chose McLean, because, you know, I think I would have been very disappointed had I gone the child psychiatry route, because I really enjoy what I do. I've done, you know, like right now, I'm working with correctional managed care. With that special population, I founded women's programs who are in trauma recovery. I've retired from, I'm not a veteran, but I've retired from the VA where I treated veterans, you know, so, you know, I've treated all these special populations, so.
It's all worked out.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, I know during your career, you've worked to reduce the stigma associated with mental illness and advocate, you know, for those that need mental health treatment and access. And why was that work so important to you to focus on
Well,
that?
through the years, you know, now there's far more, you know, with social media, far more awareness, but we still have a ways to go. But far more awareness, not only of the need to seek help. What I guess is not in my bio is while I was in Houston, I was on, it was Good Morning Houston, like Good Morning America, and I was on with the male host. And so that medium I felt helped a lot because because I would come on at 9 o'clock, just one day a week, not every day, but just one day a week. Um, I would appeal to the people who work the graveyard shift, you know, and they would come in and I attracted male patients. They said I feel like I know you, I know your style. And so I just felt like that work that I was doing just in a casual interaction with the male co-host um, helped to reduce stigma. Oftentimes I was asked to speak at various events while in Houston. And amazing the number of people who would turn out who were just hungry to get more information about their best friend, you know.
Yeah, for a
But
friend.
and so I had a very lucrative practice in you know, in Houston. And then of course I was much more active in organized psychiatry, joined several groups, and you know, we would put on various workshops and that kind of thing. But you know, over time I've pulled back a little bit from that. But I did have that as a mission. And even when I'm working with these, as I say, these various populations, I try to do my brief intervention. And I'm an administrator now, so I really don't treat the inmates. But you know, even working in this patient population where I'm treating somebody who may have a 50-year sentence, I feel like if I can, you know, make some intervention that might make a difference in his life, you know, I speak up and I say that, you know, encouraging them to go to school, get a skill, you know, that kind of thing.
I have a feeling you'll keep doing it even after you retire for the second time. It sounds like it. So maybe.
Perhaps.
So
Yeah.
you had mentioned it's coming up on your 50 years since you graduated from medical school. What part of that journey are you most grateful for?
Probably graduation.
Or the last 50 years of being in medicine and all the things that you've done?
You mean when you said the journey, you mean from since
Yes,
since
since
graduation?
graduating from medical school.
Probably just um I can't say because, you know, like I say, most of the, even coming out here where I am now, this was not a planned thing. It was just a fluke that happened. I came out here as a temporary assignment because someone didn't work out, and the recruiter knew I had worked with the same computer system and on and on. And so you know, I went back home and my boss said, would you come out, give me 2 years? And now I'm into almost 4 years. And so that's just how it is. I just like the application to Harvard. I didn't ask for the application. There was a student there who wasn't gonna do an early application. He said, well, you can take it. I'm not gonna apply early. It's that kind of thing. So it's, um, I think I'm being watched over a little bit. So,
Well, my next question I was going to ask you, would you do it all over again? Or is there anything you would do differently?
Probably the same. I would not change the fact that I went to Harvard. That definitely is not. I mean, the doors that are open in spite of isolation and maybe not having the best social life, or people talking about, yeah, he was my desk buddy for X number of years, and we took anatomy together. Even though I don't have that kind of memory or relationship memories, I would not give up that opportunity. So I don't regret Harvard, even though it seemed like it was miles away. And I'm not one to look back and be regretful. I'm more thankful than regretful, because I always say that things happen for a reason. That's just the way I've lived my life. And why lament the past if there is something major that has happened, you know. So I'd probably do it all over again. I mean, there are going to be some minor things that maybe
Of
change,
course, yeah.
but in general, I think all in all, it worked out. Mhm.
It doesn't sound like you would change too much. It really doesn't.
Yeah, I think it all worked out. I've tried to, continue in contact with Harvard. I don't have some of my classmates are really like House of God, the book Ghostwriter. He was in my class. I'm sure some of those, if they're physicians in the webinar, they know what I'm talking about. The one year, I guess he's called chairman or director of John Commission. He was in my class, and so, these folks become famous people, and you kind of go like, oh, he was in my class. But, I kind of go with the flow, but I'm also very thankful. I pause a moment and try to give thanks to, just having the opportunity. Even though I'm out here in the boonies, I can still say some positive things about what has happened in these past few years. So.
That's great. I'm gonna close out with just one more question.
Okay.
And then we'll take some questions from the audience. What advice would you give students of color today who are planning to study abroad?
Just go for it. One thing that I found, and how can I say this that it makes sense? One, the cultures are similar, and that's important for folks to understand, that there's not a whole lot of difference in that. And I also found that whether you want to call it prejudice against melanin is the same, but I found that there was still some separatism and segregation even in Europe, even the more southern countries. They seem to have been friendlier. There was more mixing of the races. But I would say go for it, because you really have an appreciation for diversity when you do that. Because I think that what's happening now in the political sphere is that the political thinking has become, I think, just a little bit too oppressive, particularly if we're talking young people. See, now with my age, someone just coming out of college is a very young person, and you know, you're still formulating your opinions about things, and you may think you know it all, but there's still a lot to learn. And I just think that if you can study abroad, and a program such as IES, I think that's why Spelman chose to send their students in such a program, as opposed to saying, here's X number of dollars and you just go find your program. But they directed us to IES. And I think that that was a wise decision and plan. So that I would encourage any person of color to do it, because especially the younger, I mean, they're much more tolerant and live more of a life of diversity than any of us ever thought of. And so learn the languages. You know, I know a little Spanish, and most of it's what I learned in high school, you know, and hardly any German, because, you know, if you don't use it, you lose it. And so where there are a lot of German speaking folks in Texas, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, I would absolutely encourage people to just go ahead and follow your dream with that.
Well, that's great advice. So, and we will hopefully have many Mural Scholars in the future to go abroad again. So, I've got a few questions from the audience here. One of your fellow Mural Scholars, Ed Wheeler.
Oh, he's on the call. Hi, Ed.
He wants to know, what are the greatest challenges you believe still exist when dealing with mental health issues? And how can religious communities help overcome that stigma attached with mental health?
Well, let me start with the second question first. Ed is the one that I was telling you that he
went to divinity school.
Yeah, and would help us sometimes when we needed prayer and a little strength to make it during that time. One of the things I'm going to ask the second one first. And I think we've made the hurdle, but not completely. You know, it depends on how, what's the word I'm trying to say? How innovative the church is. And I don't want to speak down to the Black church, but if we've got a church that recognizes limitations of pastoral counseling and is willing to suggest to the person or the person's family that they may need the help of a mental health professional, I think they can do a great service to an individual, as opposed to, especially more in the past, not quite as much now, but it still happens, where some ministers are offering good pastoral counseling, but often don't make that referral. And, you know, that whole expression that God will heal all, and, you know, and depending on who's the caretaker, if it's grandmother may not feel like that grandchild should have professional help.
It's often not talked about in the Black community. And like
absolutely.
You said, you go to the church for everything.
Exactly. And so that's probably the biggest thing that I would see there, that as long as, I think we can all be partners in this effort, but as long as the pastors with pastoral counseling or whatever they may call it, recognize the limitations, and we'll make the referral, because there are some sick people out there. They walk among us. I mean, very unstable. And some are getting even more and more depressed and even suicidal with this whole pandemic situation. Some were already alone, and they're feeling even more alone during this time. Now, if they're you know, have Zoom calls, both whether they're personal or business or whatever, that helps. But there are some people who are just, housebound, so to speak.
Mhm.
I don't mean in a disability way,
No, but yeah,
just stay in, and are not getting out. So hopefully things are going to ease up just a little bit. But I really think that we need to um, work at, the awareness and starting at a very early age. I don't want to get into a lot of diagnostic details, but we know we have kids who are, some probably need a little spanking, but some really do have ADHD. Some probably need to eat less sugar, but all of that sometimes can be sorted out by a professional. But but we do need to get that sorted out so that kid doesn't end up sometimes on medication. Sometimes then they end up, as they get older, they become bipolar. Not become, I'm gonna put it in air quotes. They're given the diagnosis of bipolar, and then before they know it, they're ending up, in the realm of special populations
Mhm.
that we treat here, because it's a very, very common history to hear when we're doing psychosocials for a lot of the inmates.
Yeah, that it wasn't caught earlier on in life.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
some were actually what we call crack babies or cocaine babies. Some, they have that excitability, agitation, um,
Mhm.
so, but sometimes you need professionals to sort out all of that, because they find that, even though they say ADHD medication is not addicting, some addicts will tell you that's how they got their start by,
Mm.
so anyway, I don't want to get
Yeah,
into specifics of the mental illness, but
that does exist. We had another question, and you sort of touched on this a little bit. Maybe there's more to add to it, but did you encounter any racism or discrimination in Vienna?
um, I'm trying to think. Oh, I'm sure I did.
Mm.
Stairs,
Mm.
but I got that in Indiana. Um, if you go to some parts in America where they are not, especially way back then, in the 60s, early 60s, who have not been accustomed to seeing Black people, little kids, they'll just stare at you because they haven't seen, Blacks before. But I'm trying to think, if there's a particular incident. Um, I can't think of anything particular. Now, sometimes, we may feel slighted over something. How, did somebody, well, I'm standing here, why they didn't wait on me, or, some slight like that. But something like that, I would likely pass over and wouldn't remember
Yeah,
that.
that it
But
would not
there's,
stay with you.
yes, but I
Right.
can't remember anything. Um, I can't really remember anything that was a biggie, no more than what's happened in the States.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I'm going to end our little conversation. This was great. It was great getting to speak with you and learn more
Okay.
about you.
Right.
Um, so hopefully we can do this again. I feel like there's probably enough for a part two.
Oh, big talker.
Well, now that
Yeah,
we
well,
know, we'll find another reason to get
right.
you
Well, I
on.
appreciate this. I didn't know what to expect. I was hoping I would see some folks, but we've got them all looking at me, I guess, huh? Is that what they're doing?
Yeah, they're looking at us, and we're not looking at them tonight.
But I do appreciate them registering, and I hope I was helpful in answering some of the questions that they may have. And
Mhm.
if there are some out there who are considering traveling abroad, please do not hesitate. And then if there are those who have been contributors, I want to thank you because it certainly helped me. I met Mr. Merrill many, many years ago, and he was just a nice man. So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you for sharing with us.
Uh-huh.
So I'm going to hand things over to my colleague, Jennifer, and she's
Okay.
just going to finish things out for us tonight. So thanks again, Shirley, and we will
Thank
see you
you.
soon.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Shirley, I'll also offer my very sincerest thanks for sharing your life experience and your life's work that you have contributed so much to making the world a better place, much like the hundreds and hundreds of Mural Scholars who have gone on IES programs since, gosh, the late 50s and right up until now. And I'm so pleased that IES alumni, many Mural Scholars, and others who've all come together to create a Mural Scholar Fund at IES Abroad so that we can continue this great legacy of more Morehouse and Spelman students studying abroad. We are looking forward to our branded annual day of giving coming up on May 17th, and the Mural Scholarship Fund will be prominently offered out there as one of the places that people can contribute funds to. It has already grown to, gosh, close to $200,000.
No.
We have our first Mural Scholar studying in London this semester, and next month he's going to be coming to us live from London. So it is very exciting. I placed in the chat the link to information about the Mural Scholarship and a list of many IES alums who are Mural Scholars and their fabulous biographies. They have certainly been groundbreakers and trailblazers, just like you, Shirley, who have made our world a better place. So once again, we thank you and continue to encourage students to do wonderful things.